So there are ways to manipulate your floor plan and your layout specifically for what you need. I'm going to tie it back to look at your lot. What is the lot going to let you do? If the lot says, hey, the property we bought, we're going to have to, in order to save money, we've got to go up instead of out. Okay, well, let's design it correctly, and let's take advantage of every way we can to try to cut some costs for you on that. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Barndo Channel. This is Charlie. I'm in the studio today with Cody, and we are back for episode 5 of the Barndo Channel Podcast. Today we are going to be talking about one of my favorite topics is should I build out or up? Should I go with a 1-story layout or a 2-story layout? And there are a lot of factors to consider before you make that final decision, right, Cody?
That is correct. Why is that your favorite topic?
Well, I get asked quite a bit, like, hey man, I mean, is it going to be more economical for me to go 2-story or go 1-story? And there's just a lot of things to discuss with that when it's hard to explain that in one phone conversation to customers.
There's lots of variables, you want to talk about when you want to decide it. And we'll talk about that today. We got 4 or 5 points, 6 points actually, I think, to hit on. So understanding the what factors, what kind of affects cost, the value, your area of the country you're in, and trying to answer all those questions you can today.
Yeah, there's a lot of them, and I'm going to take the first one today. And the first factor to consider, I was going to go back to episode 1, and when we talked about finding the perfect lot to build on. Some people almost do this backwards, where they design the floor plan, they get everything exactly the way they want, and then they go find a lot. And the worst case scenario would be, to me, you go and you purchase sight unseen, and you go buy a lot and you don't realize that, hey, by the way, that won't fit on your lot.
Right.
I've got a 70 by 40 plan, and I've got a 60-foot wide lot. So there's a lot of times that lot can dictate whether or not you're going to have to go 2-story or single story. And then along that line, you've got the dirt work, site prep that goes into that.
Yep.
Obviously, larger footprint is going to take more dirt work, more site prep, more foundation prep there. So there's some value in having, on the 2nd story or the 2-story, there's some value there in having a smaller footprint, smaller concrete pad, things like that. But I think the biggest factor is just the size of the lot. You're going to have to deal with things like your HOA may have limitations as to how far you can be off of property lines. That's average, usually 10 to 15 foot off of a property line or something like that. But, sometimes they go crazy, and you may have to be 20, 25 feet off of a property line. So your HOA may have restrictions if you're buying property in a subdivision or something like that. And then you may have easements. You may be landlocked. There's a lot of factors that can come into that. So you need to make sure when you're making that decision, don't just draw a plan and say, this is it, now I've got to go find the lot. You really need to start looking at the land and making sure that your vision for your floor plan and the lot that you're wanting to purchase are going to match in the long run, or just going to be headaches that you could avoid early on as opposed to fighting those later on.
Yeah,
All
agreed.
Right. What do you got for number 2?
Well, my part, as far as the design engineering part, that's kind of what we're going to hit on, and why you do things and how it affects a single story versus a 2-story. I have a 2-story home. I'm not anti 2-story, but a lot of things that go on to the design part on the engineering that people don't realize. So even though you're not pouring more concrete, you're not adding more dirt area out there too, as far as your pad, you're not taking as big of an area. It does change up your engineering. So what costs more money on the Barndo side for what we do? The wider you go, now that's all relative. Now I'm talking about going above like 80 or 90 feet, which is really rare in what we do.
You're talking about the width between columns.
That's right. Yeah, not the length.
Yeah, not the length of the building.
The
between
gabled side.
Gotcha. Yeah.
So when you have that, and then the taller you go, the tougher it is on your columns to withstand that. So the least expensive route on what we do on the Barndo side is a relatively skinny and not super tall Barndo. So once you start going taller, even though you're not adding a ton of material wise, right? You're not adding a bunch of footage, and that's what the big perception is. Well, I just go 25 foot tall. You can. But you actually, when we figure wind shear and we figure all these other things that actually are able to calculate, because it's the taller you are, the more wind you're going to catch, the less stable it is on that side. So that's a significant difference on that side. So that's a big part of it. It is significantly heavier when the taller you go to allow for that wind. It allows the building to rack a little bit more. It changes and moves a little bit. So that's a part of it. Also, the 2nd floor, how you achieve that. So here it's really common to do. We do a lot of wood trusses for the 2nd floor, but that's for a reason. It's much more cost effective a lot of times when you're running your HVAC ducting, all this other stuff. You can do a web truss. You can snake through that stuff a lot easier than doing steel. I have done steel before. I'm not anti-steel on floors of floors,
obviously,
But it is in our area. It's usually significantly cheaper to go, or less expensive, I guess, to do wood trusses on the floors there too. So there's ways to do 100% steel, and I'm not anti that. It's good there too, but you're going to add probably 30 or 40% more cost on the second deck, plus your other issues when you're doing your ducting, you're doing your electrical. You're going to have to figure ways to get through that I-beam that's there, and that can be really costly as well. So that's the biggest part I say. So you add wind shear the taller you go, and but it is less material, so it does offset a little bit there too. So it's less material, it's taller, little less labor on that side most of the time because you're not adding, your sheets are just longer really. You're not adding more sheets, but your framing is going to be heavier. It should be heavier. If people's building the same thing that's 12 foot tall as it is 24, got a big problem there. So that's one thing that we do on the engineering side. When we take that into effect, we look at everything, every part of the build itself, including the height of it. You can build steel buildings 60, 70 foot tall if you wanted to. The tallest I think I've ever done is about 45 feet. And that's really, really tall, but you have to account for that. So your extra bracing, your extra framing and stuff to account for that. So even though it feels less expensive, that's what a lot of people feel like. Well, it's cheaper going up versus out. But in reality, the taller you go, the bigger framing, and then the flooring are the two biggest things I want to hit on.
So to kind of give some clarity to that a little bit, what we're talking about is you're going to have the same number of columns, theoretically. Right. You'll have the same number of columns, but I wish we could put up here what a 6-inch column, 8-inch column, 10-inch column, 12-inch column, because the higher you're going, that column's either getting thicker or wider, one of the two, or however you want to word that.
Yeah, well, no, that's a good question. So then that's another engineering thing we can hit on for a second. So on your columns, girth is way more important than width of it too. So when you see trusses are what goes in your ceiling and in your attic area. That's why they're tall and skinny. The compression or the downforce, the dead load, the live load, pressing down on those, that's what causes. That's what the importance is. The taller they are. Yeah. Your columns need to be real thick and strong. That's way more important than being really, really wide because the force is all kicking it down and over. So an example, in a 12 foot eave height, a 8-inch wide, 18 pound a foot, is equivalent to a 12-inch wide, 14 pound a foot.
Gotcha.
So skinnier overall, but girthier, a little thicker beam. So that's what you need on columns. You want thicker stuff on the columns. That's what that usually looks like. And your trusses aren't really not to be as heavy, but it's more about the compression from the I-beam.
Especially with the height. And that's kind of what we're honing in on today is when you start adding that height. And for us, standard eave height is 12 foot. Yeah. So if we start a build from scratch, I'm going to start with a 12 foot eave height. We actually, when we pre-bid or we're doing our preliminary estimating, that's one of the first questions that we ask or look at on the building is, okay, what's the eave height? Yeah. Because our biggest cost probably is the steel in there, obviously. So that's the first thing we've got to make sure that we understand is how tall is this building, how thick are these I-beams going to be, how much engineering is going to go into this. So that engineering and that steel structure, it plays a huge factor and a huge role in determining two-story versus one-story. Now, if you spread out another 50, 60 feet to make your floor plan work, well, then you're adding columns in there, but maybe not as thick, maybe not as much girth in those columns. They could be a little bit less expensive as opposed to going up 20, 22 feet in the air and having to support, you're talking about that downward force that they have to absorb in that building.
Well, that's one thing too. People don't realize. So say you're going up for a second floor. Well, I'm saving all this concrete because I'm going up on it. Yeah. Well, you still have your wood trusses. You still have your decking, your 1.1 or whatever side we use on that side there too. And also, you're going to be a little more limited to what kind of flooring you put down on the second floor when you're putting it to some kind of floor decking that's there. You
can't put stained concrete up there?
Very hard to do.
I've been asked that a few times. I just want concrete floors on the second floor. Time out. Okay. Are you sure about this?
So you can't use a glue down material when you're doing second floor there too. You can do tile. You have to get a good base there for that. You can do LVP. We do a lot, but it has to be the click in because it doesn't sit down properly. It doesn't adhere right. So there are limitations there too, but again, that's the kind of the misperception on that. Now, one positive part about that, we're really not going to dive into that fully, but the plumbing's a little bit different. If you're plumbing the second floor, it's a little bit easier to navigate because you don't have to do the rough in earlier. Yeah. But anyway, look at your columns. The thicker, the taller it is, the thicker they are. You do save some concrete and dirt work there too, but usually it's kind of offset probably about the same, maybe a little less expensive going taller, but you're going to add your floor trusses and your decking, which it will, I can almost guarantee you, be just as much or more than your slab.
No doubt about it. All right, so the third thing that we're going to talk about, the third factor is going to be basically your floor plan or layout itself. Yeah. Is your layout more conducive to going up versus out? I always try to tell people that when that floor plan gets over about 1,200 square feet, maybe 11 or 1,200 square feet, you're almost as beneficial now. It's almost like that's the threshold that you get over to. Just, spread it out if you can.
Yeah.
Because like you're saying, by the time we add thicker columns and we add the subfloor, our plumbers and electricians are going to charge us more for the second level. I mean, all these trades are going to come in and go, oh, that's the second floor. I'm going to charge you a little bit more for that, for the labor and things like that. But take a look at your layout and make sure that you've got a plan that is fit for single story or two story if that's what you want. Because I have had a lot of customers that send me a single story plan and they want to turn it into a two story plan. And sometimes that's a nightmare because the plan's just not laid out that way.
Well, you have to account for stairs, right?
Yeah, of course. Use square footage. If you look at this and it's a 2,000 square foot house and then you want to put a loft in it, okay, that's great. Well, now I'm going to have to widen your living room probably 4 foot, minimum of 4 foot. Yeah. I mean, I can leave it that way. You can lose 4 foot or you can gain 4 foot, but that's something that you have to factor in. Where your mechanical's going to go? Are we going to put those upstairs? That could save you some room. But there's things like that when you look at a single story, the advantage of that is we can give you these big sprawling, wide open spaces in a Barndominium. When you go to that 2 story, you're a little bit limited. Vaulting that ceiling is going to be more expensive.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah. When you go into a lot of them, you've got big open living and kitchen area, and then all the second floor is kind of back behind that looking over into that area, and they want it all the way up. They want it vaulted all the way up. Well, wood framing, sheetrock, those guys charge us an arm and a leg to go that high.
Yeah.
The height of that building. And we had this conversation today with Jennifer. When you get that height on that building in that living room, you have to treat that like a 2 story, even though really the only living space that is in the second story is where the bedrooms, the bathrooms are in the second floor over there. You have to treat that big open area of your living, kitchen, and dining as a second floor as well, because it's going to get sheetrock, it's going to get trim, it's going to get wood framing and all that. So there's just added cost in going up on that second floor that you have to factor in. And again, like you just said a while ago, by the time you factor in all of these things, it may not be the most cost effective. Yeah. And I have found, and it's not always true. I mean, I've been wrong before once or twice today, but it's usually when you get around that 1,100, 1,200 square foot range, you kind of have to make a decision. Which way do I want to go? And, and I've run it several different ways for lots of different customers to show them both. But once we hit that 1,300 square foot, it's almost to the point where you just, hey, you know what? Concrete's going to be cheaper than us taking this building up another 10 foot, adding trusses, and trying to put 2 bedrooms and another 2 baths up there. It just gets costly and adds up really quick. I think the cheapest way to do it layout wise would be if you're just adding a loft area. And I'm going to add another little factor in here that we hadn't discussed yet. But when you're designing that layout and you want a loft area, just, pro tip number 1 would be take advantage of the gabled area, the gabled end of the building. Do not try to do that on your side walls. You want to do that in your end walls and take advantage of the open space and the roof pitch that you have there. So there's ways that we can give you that loft area, but not necessarily have to raise the building that much. Right. So instead of saying, well, I need bedroom, bathroom, and all of this, where we have to raise this thing up, give you 8 foot ceiling height in there and adjust the building accordingly, we're able to take a loft space and go, well, I can lift it up 4 feet, change the roof pitch to a 5-on-12, and really open that center section of that building up. Right. Now you've got some loft space and some usable space up there if you want to do that. So there are ways to manipulate your floor plan and your layout specifically for what you need. I'm going to tie it back to look at your lot. What is the lot going to let you do? If the lot says, hey, the property we bought, we're going to have to, in order to save money, we've got to go up instead of out. Okay, well, let's design it correctly and let's take advantage of every way we can to try to cut some costs for you on that. So with the second floor, your next topic is...
I don't want to forget one thing. Okay. So you hit on the stairs just a minute, and the design part of that is incredibly important. What Charlie's talking about, losing or adding 4 feet to the living room, it's not just that. You also have to find a way where your design is, where you're not obstructing a doorway, a wall, or something unique. And when you get to the top as well, you have to land at a place. You got
to have a landing up there.
Landing that's not going to affect the floor plan at all. So people don't realize when you're building a house that isn't super large, when you have that area in there too that's not accounted for, you're losing a ton of square footage up there trying to account for that. And at the top there, you're going to have a wasted space up where, because you have to land and then turn what you're going to do with what's there too. So you're going to have a landing area up top, not just the end of the stairs, but the area you're not going to walk up right into a bedroom.
Yeah, there's a door right there.
Yeah. you're going to have a little area there too. And down below at the same time, you can't block that area. You can't put any furniture in front of it there too. So you're losing more space sometimes than you realize on that.
Yeah. And it's almost like a hallway. I hate hallways. Hate's a strong word. When I'm designing a plan for a customer, I don't like hallways that much because you're paying the square footage cost to walk on that. And basically, that's all you're getting out of it. Same thing with that walkway on the second floor, because a lot of times you're going to have a catwalk of some sort up there to be able to access the rooms or whatever. And it's just added space into that. That's really, you almost look at it and go, do we really want to do that? Because it's almost like wasted space per se. But yeah, that's a very, very good point. And a lot of times customers will come in and say, well, let's just put the door under the staircase.
Yeah.
Let's just do that. Horrible idea. There are instances where that can happen, but it goes back to almost the engineering and the architectural part of it. You have to design the staircase to be steep enough. Spacing has to be good enough for you to even get a 3068 door or a 2868 door under there. You can put small doors. People utilize the pantry space, but it's usually on the very end or the highest point of the staircase that they're coming back in under the staircase. We have a lot of people that want to just walk right through the staircase and go into a room. Well, it just doesn't work that way. You have to have the head clearance and head height and things like that.
And stair finish out can be really expensive too. We'll kind of wrap that part up, but it can be very expensive based on the design. If it's real wood, if it's open banister, if it's glass banister. So there's some cost in a part of that as well too that can add up really quickly on that.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, accessibility. That's you.
I'm efficiency, bud.
What?
I'm way ahead of you, Charlie.
Oh, you got efficiency now.
Efficiency.
Man, I'm getting off script, guys. Off script. Sorry about that.
HVAC and energy efficiency. So this will be a quick topic. So in most cases, if you're doing a 2-story there too, you have to have 2 different sets of units. One control upstairs, one consider downstairs. If you've ever had somebody that had a loft and didn't actually have separate units, I've heard it 100 times. It doesn't cool well, doesn't heat well, because if your thermostat's downstairs, it's going to catch what's downstairs versus upstairs.
Yep.
Most of the time they add on a mini split or something like that. I flipped a house a few years ago, and what was funny, the lady I sold it to, she came and she said, my friends lived here before, and it never stayed cool in here. And I said, I can understand why, because it was above one of the bedrooms, big open space, it wasn't really a bedroom, but more of just a play area.
Yeah.
And it was obviously way variance. And so it were duct the same way. They wanted to use one unit and it just didn't do well. If you're going to have actual living space up there, you almost have to have another furnace, some kind of air conditioner there to control it. Otherwise, you're going to have a variations, even with with what we do as far as our insulation. You're going to have a 10, maybe 5 to 10 degree difference. Let's say 5 degrees. Let's just say you like it at 70 degrees and it's 75 up there or 74 up there because the way the heat goes, it's just something you have to deal with. So
that's right.
It is not as efficient, but really because you're having to add more units. So
are you saying that warm air rises?
It does.
It's interesting.
So having 2 units instead of 1, that is a more of a cost. It's not that the units are that inefficient, but you just have to have more units to control that area because you're at a different elevation. You're below, if you're below a kitchen, you're gonna have natural steam or natural heat rising above that too. So it's not that it's less efficient. You just got to add more units to control it better.
Because we're foaming the entire structure. Yeah. So it doesn't matter if it's a single story or 2-story. The whole thing's going to be encapsulated with spray foam. So it's climate controlled. Yeah. It's just a matter of, and I made that mistake a lot early on. I mean, I made a very few mistakes in my first year here. But one of the things that I would always do when I would have that 2-story layout like that, I would put 1 unit. I would just look at the square footage and go, okay, well, it's 2,400 square foot. I could probably put a 4-ton in there pretty easily. And Tim, our guy that does our HVAC for us, he would immediately call me or email me and go, what are you doing? I'm like, what are you talking about, man? This thing, you told me how much I can factor in here. That is a 2-story building. It's going to need 2 units. And it took me a few times to really understand that and kind of grasp that concept because I was just looking at a square footage. But I like the fact that we can guarantee you that it's going to be an efficient building, no doubt, because it's foamed, it's sealed tight. But you're going to want, if you're a stickler for that climate control, like my wife wants 68 degrees. Yeah. If we were on the 2nd floor and she wanted 68 degrees, we're going to need another unit for that. I mean, we're going to have to definitely get another unit put in there. So let's talk the next topic. I'm going to go to accessibility and kind of planning long term. And when you're going into your floor plan design and considering 2-story versus single story, we get, I really feel like we get 2 ends of the spectrum, really. And I get newlyweds who want their first home, and then I get a lot of retirees. Hey, kids have moved out, we're retired, we want our forever home, this is it, just the 2 of us. Yep. So I'm going to kind of go to that scenario And then I want to talk a little bit about like a rental property, Airbnb, something like that. So let's talk about the accessibility of that. We try to design homes for the most part with ADA compliance as far as our door openings and things like that. You'll see some customers tell us, hey, put a 2868 there, 26, whatever. They're not really concerned with that. But I want to talk a little bit. You're going to talk about resale value in just a minute. But when you're planning this layout, whether or not to do a first or second floor, please consider long term.
Yeah.
I'm about to turn 46. Is that right? Yeah, I can't even remember. I'm about to turn 46 next week. And if I were, and we just built a house, and that was one of the things that we considered was I do not want a second floor. My parents have a second floor home in Arkansas, and immediately like, do not build a second floor.
Yeah.
Do not do it because they're 65, 70 years old now, and they do not want to go up and down the stairs. My mom says, I haven't been upstairs in I don't know how long. I don't even know if the air conditioning unit is working properly. I'm not going up there. But there's a lot of factors. If you have that second floor, things happen in life. Life happens. There's a lot of uncertainty there. But if you're looking at possibility of wheelchair, any kind of handicap accessibility on that second floor, that's going to drive that cost up quite a bit to make sure that everything is accessible.
Yeah.
As far as handicap or ADA or anything like that. And then looking at if you're planning for that forever home, I mean, you may be in great health now, but 20 years from now, we don't know. 20 years from now, my wife may be pushing me around in a wheelchair. I hope she's working, providing for me, pushing me around in a wheelchair.
Exactly.
Life is good, right? But if you look at Airbnb or something like that, or a rental property, almost the same exact thing.
Mm-hmm.
You make yourself more marketable to somebody if everything is a single floor. To me, I mean, there's an appeal to a 2-story, depends on the view and where you're at. But just making sure that you're marketable with that rental. In making sure that everything in that layout is single story, everything's accessible and pretty easy to get to. So just make sure that you're planning long term when you're looking at this. Don't get excited and think, hey, right now, this is what we want right now. I'm 25 years old and this is what I want. This is my forever home. If you use the phrase forever home, plan long term for accessibility and things like that in your layout.
Yeah, I built we talked about this, I think, a couple episodes ago. I think I did. Maybe we didn't, but I built a really small 2-bedroom home for a couple.
That was your other podcast.
It was.
Yeah.
We started designing it, and they were in retirement age, and they moved to the area to be by their grandkids to watch them in their sports and stuff. This is, I don't know, 2018, been a while. And I asked her, and they wanted to put their HVAC unit upstairs, and I said, well, guys, there's no way to get to it. They said, we'll move this scuttle hole, and we'll get a ladder. And I'm going, y'all are 65 now.
Yeah.
That's probably not a great idea.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, that's something that they wanted to do. And I want people to be prepared for that, or realize that, hey, every 3 months when you change your HVAC unit out, unless you're going to pay somebody, you have to climb up a ladder, and God forbid something happens and you fall. I mean, it's just the way of the world now there
That's
too.
That's exactly right. Got to plan for that type of stuff, whether we like it or not.
Yeah.
All right. What do you have? You have
resale
value. So let's talk about that.
So, we'll kind of transition into what we were talking about before, as far as your amount of people that you can sell to is a little bit different when you're having a 2-story house, because people that are wanting their final home or something, they're not wanting to have to climb stairs all the time. That's going to eliminate your house.
Yeah, what we just talked about. I mean, if I'm looking for that home, and I 2 stories immediately off the market for me.
Yeah, so that's a big thing to look at there too. Whenever you have comps or comparables, people usually look at other 2 stories that's similar on that side there too. So I wouldn't say the value goes down per se based on a 2-story. You're not losing value, but you are limiting the amount of people that will buy your home.
Marketability.
Yeah. So that's probably a way bigger deal on that end too. So it's not something that I would say, hey, it's a less value, because there are times, like you mentioned before, you have a real skinny lot, you have to go up. I saw a guy, I don't remember his name, on TikTok or something the other day, where he builds a 1,000 square foot 2-story little house there. And it's 1,000 total. I mean, it is like 12 foot wide or something crazy, but because the lots are like 18 foot wide, so they had to do that there too. But as far as accessibility, man, it would be not great. It may be great for some people, but very limited market there.
Who are you going to sell that to when you're done with it?
Yeah. So that's the big thing, man. You want to look at for the next user, for the next person after that too, who's able to buy that and use it. And man, that's a huge part of that.
Yeah. I think some of that is also can be regionally, your region can factor into that, because you think about big cities. I mean, we're probably not going to build a lot of Barndos in New York City,
not many
downtown, but there are certain areas that, land is hard to come by. Texas, we have a little bit of benefit of you can go buy 5 acres, 10 acres, 20 acres. A lot of places you can't do that. and you're having to squeeze into lots and you have to go up. So maybe the resale value in some of those or the marketability, not resale value, but the marketability for that home for sale may be higher in those regions because it's not uncommon to have a 2-story or a townhome type layout there. But in Texas, we've got these big sprawling open landscapes. I mean, they're looking for a big, humongous open floor plan, and that's a little bit more marketable where we are here. So, but that's definitely a factor when you're designing that dream home.
You know, one thing I wanted to mention, that the reason I mentioned before, I have a 2-story house, and you know, if I lean a little bit more to single story, why would I go 2-story? So we have 5 kids. A couple of them are out of the house now, but we had 5 kids when we first built a home, and I wanted each one of them to
get the sound effect. Kids are out.
I wanted each one of them to have their own room, and so our main house floor plan is 3,800, 4,000 square feet, something like that.
Yeah,
that is a very large area on 1 story. And so my footprint would have been so gigantic, it would have been really hard to deal with. So ours was a really good design for us, and it works out well. We have most of the kids lived upstairs, stayed upstairs in their bedrooms, and my wife and I's bedroom, and our youngest is downstairs. But whenever we did that there too, there is a reason for the 2-story. It would have been probably cheaper for me to do a single story, but it would have been so massive. It would have looked
spread
really
out. I mean, you're talking about family time. Hey, you got to get a megaphone and get an intercom system to talk to your kids.
So that was the reason for that too. So there is plus and minuses there too, Ben, but it's all about what you want to do. But just the biggest thing we want to cover today is understanding why things cost what they cost, what limitation you're going to have, what you have to allow for, and to make sure that you're making the best decision for yourself.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there. I mean, that is per customer. You know, that's person to person, individual, family to family. So there's no right or wrong. We're just trying to educate you as far as things to consider.
Yep.
Don't just come into this thinking I'm 2-story no matter what. And when we can look at you and say, I can make this a lot more budget friendly for you if I can do it in a single story.
Yeah.
And we've done that a lot for homeowners. So that's definitely something that we are trying to work on. And that's what this podcast is about. It's just not trying to sway you one way or the other, just try to give you information and make you knowledgeable as you go through the whole process of making good, educated decisions on what to do or what your next step is. So let's talk for just a minute. I didn't tell you I was going to do this. Let's talk for just a minute about, we went to Vegas last week and I lost a lot of money. Just kidding. Didn't lose any money. We put a lot of steps on the old bodies here, but we had a really good week, had some really, really good connections there. If you're a contractor and you've never gone to IBS,
the International Build Show.
Yeah, International Build Show in Las Vegas. It was awesome, man. I've never seen so many vendors, and having not grown up in the construction industry, we've been twice now. Both times that I've been, it's just been amazing to me when you walk in those convention centers and see everything available, all the new technology. We got to see panoramic doors. We are headed to Nashville tomorrow.
Yeah, manana. Yeah.
So, we are headed to Nashville, Tennessee. Delaney Walker's build is almost done.
Yeah, man.
We are so close. So we're actually going to go meet Delaney tomorrow and walk through the house, get some video up there. So if you're following us on Instagram, TikTok, any of those, we're going to have some video up there. So we're excited about that trip. And I think he's really, really excited to get moved in there as well. So you got anything else for us to discuss, talk about?
No, man, we're actually getting into March now, and we're builds are starting to get cranked up, and a lot of calls coming in, man. It's going to be exciting 2025.
Spring has sprung for sure. So we're getting busy. We actually had a quiet day today. Everybody in the office was kind of panicked, like, what do I do? The phone hasn't rang much today, which is good. Every once in a while, we get to kind of get caught up on paperwork and stuff. But yes, it's starting to warm up a little bit here, and we're ready to get rocking and rolling in the spring. So that's going to wrap us up for episode 5. Again, we're talking about out versus up today. What is the best for your family and your situation? We're just trying to hopefully shed some light on things to consider, some budget items to consider when you're designing that floor plan, and whether or not to go 2-story versus single story. So we hope we've given you some good information today. We're going to sign off here. We'll see you again next time on the Barndo Channel Podcast from 1845 Barndominiums.
Adios.